Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. This is the weekend edition where we interview notable people from the world of real estate investing. Today is no exception. We have a great guest all the way from Riverside, California. Welcome to the show, Jared Jones.
And thanks for having me.
Well, good to have you. It's been a while since you were last on the show. You're a partner with us in one of our projects up in Spokane, Washington, but you're also running your own business in California. There's been a lot of changes, especially on the regulatory front, and I'm excited to talk about that because it could potentially have a massive impact on housing in California as a whole. But maybe before we do, perhaps give a little bit of your backstory and how you got to this point in your journey.
For sure. Yeah. So, I started out just, right before the market crash in 2008. And as 2008 happened, I transitioned into sales and flipping. And so I flipped hundreds of homes and started buying and holding at that time as well. A lot of single family, small multifamily. And then about 5 years ago, almost 6 now, the state changed a lot of our housing laws, allowing for ADUs on every property in California. So we started doing a lot of that for our own investments, and it's morphed into a new company, Middle Housing Partners, that we run, which is a build-to-rent, vertically integrated company. So we do our own acquisition, design, construction, property management, and capital management with our private equity fund.
And you've been doing some fascinating work, especially with ADUs and things like that, all through Riverside, repairing fire-damaged properties after the Palisades and fires in Altadena. Talk to me a little bit about what's changed in the market since then.
Yeah, so what's interesting over the last 6 years is the state law has continued to morph and get more and more aggressive. And so it started out with 2 ADUs on a lot, and then it went up to 4, and then we're now in a position where small lot subdivision is essentially what it's become, and you have the opportunity to put 10 units on a single family lot in addition to what's existing, plus another few units. So you can achieve 14 units on most any lot with a minimum lot size of 1,200 square feet in a single family zone. And in a multifamily zone, it's a 600 square foot lot size minimum.
Wow. Those are tiny lots. If you think about the floor plate of just an apartment, after you remove the setbacks, there's not much left. Are these being built zero lot line? What's the approach here?
Yeah, the bulk of the product that we are putting together is zero lot line, and we don't have any 600 square foot lots that we're working on, but we have a lot of them that are in the 900 square foot range, and so they really become townhomes. We do have a little bit of condo product that's going on as well, but in general, you're looking at, or like what we're looking at is that townhome attached product and a little bit of smaller lot subdivision with like a 12 to 1,800 square foot lot.
Yeah, in 900 square feet, you can have a floor area of 600 square feet. You can go 3-story. You're at 1,800 square feet for a townhome. That is workable. When I think about, these really very high dense situations, I think first and foremost about parking. California as a state is still a driving state. There is not public transit of the density that would be required to make these, truly a driverless type environment. Maybe that'll come with robo-taxis and all the rest, but today that's not the case. So when I think about density, I think first and foremost is parking being the constraint. So in the townhouse context, that makes sense. But what about multifamily? If you're building 10 to 14 units on a 1,200 square foot lot, where do the cars go?
Yeah, that is one of the beauties from our perspective about quiet density, where you're not in this spot where you're going to put in 500 units, 14 units. It's a lot. no question. But ultimately, there's tons and tons of street parking in a lot of the communities where these kinds of projects will go. And then there are parking rules surrounding this product. If you're not within half a mile of transit, then you do have parking that's required. So that becomes a constraint that you have to solve for. And then the setbacks are state mandated. So it's side and rear of 4 foot. But like you said, we can have attached. And so it's really just from the side and the back of the property that we have that constraint that we have to work with. And so a lot of what we're putting together is 3 stories with parking underneath. You have like a 400 to 600 square foot footprint, so we can get our 2-car garage underneath and then, just head up that set of stairs.
Wow. And so in order to get a 2-car garage, you've got to have at least 25-foot lot width minimum.
So, yeah, basically it's a 400 square foot garage that we need, right? Yeah. So if I have a 20 by 20, I can do that. And so technically we need about an 18.5-foot width to be able to get, because you can get a 16-foot width garage that does work. And so there's a couple constraints that we deal with on that. But in general, we're typically able to achieve 1 to 2 parking spots per unit. Like, we're never doing anything where we're not parking it at all. Even if we're allowed to not park it, we always make sure that we have on site.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It doesn't matter at one level what the government allows, it's what the market demands that counts, because the government's not renting these from you, the clients are.
Right, 100%.
So what are some of so we went through a period of increased ADU density. In your estimation, I know might not be any science behind this, did that move the needle?
Yeah, it did. And so it's funny because we're also now, because we have started doing a decent amount of construction volume, we're part of the Builders Industry Association here in California. There's a newsletter that just came out saying that basically the gist was ADUs are cute, but we need real solutions. It's ironic to me because they go on to talk about master plan communities and said it's the only viable solution. It's been this way for the last 50 years and will continue for the next 50 years. And I think that's an interesting outlook because in 2024, which is the latest data that we have, 30,000 of the 100,000 units that got built in California were ADUs. And so that's basically an over-the-night success from my perspective, taking up 30% of market share. But more important than that, the way that the laws have morphed, your use case on ADUs 2 years ago in 2024 was small mom and pop investors, and it was really usable for 1 or 2 units on a property. Well, 2025 changed the game. So there became a lot of these small lot subdivision laws, as well as some duplex law that came into effect. And so we don't have the numbers yet on that, but I would be shocked if we weren't in the 50,000 unit range last year. But with the way that laws have morphed now, you're now starting to see some real mid-sized developers getting involved. I would anticipate that within the next year, we will see more than 100,000 units per year of these small middle housing infill kind of projects. And my prediction is in 2 years, it will own the industry in California.
So this is the so-called missing middle that all municipalities have been talking about for decades. The theory, the rationale behind this is that the most expensive thing to install is the municipal infrastructure. And so urban sprawl is expensive. You keep adding roads, water, sewer, electric infrastructure, where in fact you can get much better yield on your tax base if you can increase the density within that infrastructure that already exists. So that makes a lot of sense. At what point does the capacity of that infrastructure, especially in older and mature neighborhoods, become a constraint as well, irrespective of what the state says, because they can't be all-knowing, all-seeing in every neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a It's a really interesting question. We've talked about it a lot internally. And with the way that these projects come about, kind of like what we talked about before, like it's not 200 units on one site. And so it's relatively gentle density that we're seeing here spread across a large municipal spot. And so, from my perspective, if I've got a 6-inch sewer main in the street, I'm in good shape. Like, that's not really going to change anything. One of the interesting things that I have seen over the last little bit as we've started working on a lot of these infill projects is specifically in California, there's something called Prop 13, which fixed our property taxes for the last 30 years or 40 years.
Or it reduced the escalation of those property taxes.
Correct. Yes, correct. And so you're not getting reassessed every year for your new market value. Well, it's created a lock-in effect. And so what we've seen is a lot of these older neighborhoods where they've got the idyllic Leave It to Beaver kind of situation going on. It's not Leave It to Beaver anymore because you don't have people in those houses. It was once 6 or 7 people, and now it's 2. And so really what these projects are actually seeking to do is very interesting because you're not actually increasing the planned density. You're returning to the planned density by bringing people back in these neighborhoods that once were there and no longer can afford to be there. And so it's a really interesting situation that we find ourselves in because we have downtowns. The population in our city, for example, has like tripled in that 40-year time frame, but the downtowns are struggling. And they're struggling because that urban sprawl or suburban sprawl put us into this position where it's like, great, yeah, 30 minutes away from downtown, you still live in the same city. Versus when we bring, so you're not going to get all of those people at those restaurants, but when we bring people back into those neighborhoods, that's a separate thing. And what's interesting for us and fun for us is getting to hear the stories of people that are moving into these neighborhoods that grew up there, but literally cannot afford to live there, even though they have the same kind of jobs that their parents had. And so that's a really wild, outlook on what we're actually experiencing here. And so there is some satisfaction for us in being able to bring people back to their neighborhoods where they grew up.
Well, and I think California is one of those states where the percentage of owner-occupied homes is one of the lowest in the nation. There was a very high percentage of renters versus owner-occupants. And so that the demand for that housing is definitely on the rental side of the equation.
Well, look, I mean, I think that the 800-pound gorilla in the room is that there's just not enough housing. It doesn't matter what kind of housing it is. And at the end of the day, it's not that people don't want to buy. They absolutely do. It's can they afford to buy? In Riverside, back when my parents bought their first home, you could work an average job and buy a medium-priced home. Today, you have to have 4 people working in order to afford the medium-priced home. You need to make $188,000 a year to afford a home in Riverside right now. That's the median price. And the median household income with 2 incomes is $85,000. So it puts people in this position where that's not really tenable. We are the 5th most expensive rental market in the nation as a metro area. And so from that perspective, and by the way, the 4 above it are all in California as well. And so there's a lot of this pressure on this market. But when we have the opportunity to build on these small lot subdivision projects, now we get to put people on a 1,500 square foot lot or a 2,000 square foot lot, but now they're in a house that they actually can afford to buy, maybe not for an $85,000 income, but if you're making 130 or 140, you actually have an option where you want to be now.
Makes sense. Well, fascinating, Jared. If folks want to connect, if they want to learn more, what's the best way?
Yeah, I'm Middle Housing Partners on Instagram or Jared Jones on LinkedIn.
Love it. Well, Jared, always great to catch up. And for the listeners at home, definitely want to connect with Jared Jones at middlehousingpartners.com or on social media on LinkedIn. The links will all be in the show notes. And in the meantime, have an awesome rest of your weekend. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.